Former Secretary of State Colin Powell once said, "Children need a network. Children need to be part of a tribe, a family, a community." We all know the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." How often do we think about these concepts specifically in regard to education? How often do we think about schooling as a community effort and an investment? Can problems that arise in the classroom be solved by addressing issues outside of school walls? My research here for this semester began with curiosity about the lowering of standards in education. I have heard anecdotes of kids being pushed through their school career without truly having a grasp on what they are being taught. Tragic stories of kids in middle school who are illiterate, or new college students who can't write a one-page report without AI assistance. Stories like those are not unheard of these days. It turns out the problem is not just an anecdotal one. A 2023 article from The Economist says that as metrics of academic proficiency continue to decline in America, graduation rates are on the rise. The trend is for our kids to be pushed through a system that is not always equipping them with what they need. The factors that come together to facilitate these stories are expansive and complex, but there are running themes that contribute to these issues. One common thread that kept popping up in the literature was the concept of the achievement gap, and the importance of a stable community and home life in aiding academic proficiency. Significant contributing factors in academic achievement more often than not come down to socioeconomic status, ethnic demographic, and living conditions at home. Many educational policies have been enacted over the years on multiple levels of government to address this state of affairs, but they often fall short getting to the core of the problem. Students are deeply affected by the challenges they face outside their school building. Children that are facing difficulty in learning often have a reason for it that has its origin in their home or community. It can be easy to turn a blind eye to this, or even to be totally unaware of the problem in the first place. So that's why I wanted to learn more about this from an insider perspective. I sat down with two teachers who have taught in two very different demographics in the greater Grand Rapids area. But as we shall see, the difference in the student body doesn't change the principles of some of the challenges they face, and absolutely doesn't change the heart they have for the kids entrusted to them. I'm excited to share with you my conversation with my friends, teachers Melissa Byrd and Riley Flake, as we hear their experiences investing into the lives of little ones and what we can learn about supporting them in education. Let's dive right in. Yeah, if you guys would give kind of a brief background of what you're up to now in education and kind of your experience so far, who have you taught, age groups, stuff like that. So Melissa, you want to start?
Yeah, so I'm Melissa. I've taught at my school district for 17 years now. I was an early childhood special education teacher for 13 of those years and then took a break and moved to first grade. So I've been a lot in the lower elementary classes and working with little kids. Our school is very rural, so there's a lot of country people and a lot of parental involvement within my school district. So some of the things that you're saying, I'm already like, oh, interesting to hear that, because our parents are pretty involved. Within our community, we do have a trailer park, and those are the children who come into the school who definitely need a lot more support when it comes to that SES, social economic status. That has been very noticeable. So a lot of those kids will come in hungry, they'll come in needing clothes, or the parents will need more support, they struggle more academically, and we can kind of get more into that later, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, you're already kind of hit the nail on the head with the parental involvement aspect. So, Riley, what's your experience been so far?
My name is Riley Flake. I have been in college for the past 5 years to become a teacher, and I've been working in education for the past 3 years. 1 year as a self-contained teacher, so 1 year actually teaching the class, but all 3 years working mostly with older kids, mostly middle school. My experience with inner city school varies pretty wildly. I mean, of course, you have plenty of children who have very involved parents, but we see a lot more of either single parent homes or very uninvolved parents, or I even have some kids who their parents are not in the picture at all. Either they're adopted or living with friends. Just crazy parts of the spectrum that I mean, you see every day, and then you can see kind of the effects that has on the kids. So very different.
Very different experience there. What was your guys' experience with education growing up? Did you have a good school experience? In that, do you remember specific instances where it was a tough time in the classroom because of stuff going on at home or in your own community?
So my home life was great growing up. I had a really stable home, and so I think that helped me in school. I started off in a public elementary school, and then we moved to a charter school from there for middle school, and then for high school I went to a Christian school. So I had a lot of movement within my academic career, which I did not love that, so I wanted more stability nowadays for my kids, and I think that would help if you had maybe some instability within your home too. I'm thankful that I did not have that. And I had a teacher in elementary who really just noticed my love for children, and so at a very young age, that teacher was building into my life. I think in second grade, I was working with a kiddo who had a speech IEP, and she would just pull me with that friend about 20 minutes a day, and I would actually have flashcards, and I would help her with speech. She was a year younger than me, and then in third grade, I was making a star on a paper and saying good job, and she's like, have you ever considered being a teacher? So from that moment, I was like, yeah, I think I want to be a teacher. So that teacher really built into me.
How old were you?
Third grade.
Wow.
I know.
So that was pretty early on there, that helping meet the need of someone else instilled in you maybe a desire or a little spark there of, I can continue this maybe.
Yes.
That's really, really cool. Riley, did you have a similar experience in that way?
No. So I had without getting into specifics, a little bit of more difficult life growing up, and I had the same school that I was at, Parkview for elementary school, and then New Hall for middle school, so I didn't move around too much, but I was just completely disinterested in learning. I mean, I liked to read, but that was just about it. Pretty much everything I thought of, or anytime I was in school, I was basically like, why am I here? Like, I didn't have a lot of great relationships with many of my teachers. When I finally got to high school, my parents and I moved around quite a bit. So I went to 3 different high schools those first 3 years that I attended high school, and then I dropped out, and then I moved out when I was 16. So I dropped out and moved out when I was 16. And then I was like, I'm never going back to school. Like, I'm never going to set foot in a school again. I don't really value my education. So it was like that for a few years. I think I went back and got my GED when I was 20. And then when I was 21, I was praying about it, and then God told me that I was going to be a teacher. And then I was like, there's absolutely no way. I was like, I do not like kids. I do not consider myself intelligent enough to offer kids anything in the way of learning. I'm not very patient. I don't consider myself very patient. And obviously over time, those things change, and then God showed me a lot of what I have to offer. But my childhood, no, I did not have a lot of love for education at all.
So would you say your home life was a significant contributing factor in that instability in school too?
Oh yeah. So when growing up, the only times that grades were ever really cared about were around parent-teacher conferences. And my parents always went to parent-teacher conferences, but I only ever heard like, hey, this makes us look bad. So that was kind of the perspective my parents had. And then even as a kid, I was like, well, if it makes you look bad, then, I mean, I don't really care about that. And then I just won't go to school then we don't have to go to parent-teacher conferences. There was never that, like, hey, this is good for you. I mean, maybe they said it, like, offhandedly, but I never really felt that was, like, a real thing for me.
See, and I had a parent who I struggled really, really bad in math. Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And so every night my dad would take me and we would work on math, and it wasn't always a pleasant time, but he was building into me that whole time. Like, this is important. I want you to try your best. And even if I got a B, he was still proud of me. But I saw that was important to my family, that I succeeded. And success didn't even mean getting hundreds. It just meant trying your best.
So we kind of have like the yin yang here, the two sides of the coin, that at least I've been seeing so far in my research of, a stable home life, kind of a longer time at each school to relatively to grow those relationships with teacher, and then that reflects back to a supportive parent who is willing to invest in you at home for your education. And then the complete opposite, where there's instability in life in general for Riley, and then parenting that does not support education. And you said you dropped out at 16?
Yep. And I also didn't have really strong teacher connections either. Like, I mean, part of that was probably due to, I mean, me when I'm a teenager, teenage boys aren't really great at making friends, but I can't remember like a lot of teachers that I really, really liked. There were some teachers that I liked, but in terms of having a relationship with, like, not really. There was one third grade teacher that I really enjoyed, and I think that's about it.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. So, we kind of went over there, how those experiences shaped your desire to become a teacher. So then, moving forward to your time as a teacher, what was your first experience, if you can remember, with a kid who obviously had a difficult home situation or home life, and in that, was it evident in their academic performance? Riley, you want to start with that?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the first year that I was working as an educator of any kind, I worked at an inner city school called River City Scholars, really low income demographic. I think it was like 97% African American. There was one student who came in for like, I think a week straight, or at least a couple days. He would come in, put his head down, fall asleep. And then, me, it's my first year, I'm like, dude, what are we doing? Like, we got to get this kid up. He's not reading. He's not participating. And then the teacher, who had a lot more experience with me, or than me, she was like, yeah, like, I kind of get what you're saying, but I mean, this child is homeless right now, and he has because she knew mom. Mom they were sleeping in their car, and these were some hotter months, and he had two younger sisters that he would have to take care of quite often.
Jeez.
I don't know the specifics that were going on in mom's life, but this child was left, and he was an 8th grader. He was left with his younger sisters pretty often. So then she was like, what do I do? Like, I want this kid to learn, obviously, but is robbing him of the sleep he is going to get throughout the day that he's not going to get at night, is that going to help him learn? And I was like, probably not. So that was something that I kind of had to be like, oh, I should probably back off of that.
Wow. that was your first case of seeing obvious school implications of stuff outside of school.
There was also one other experience where so I was filling in for a math teacher that was just like gone. So like halfway through the year, she kind of just like dipped. So the kids, and this had been going on for a while, there were some kids there who hadn't had a math teacher in 3 years. So at one point they gave me like a stack of folders that was like, so these were 8th graders. And they were like, hey, like, pass these out at the end of the day. They were giving these papers back to the kids that had filled them out earlier in the year at the beginning. So obviously I was looking through them, it was kind of just like, it was like an interactive activity that was also gauging like where they were at academically. And one of the questions on there was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And some of the answers were heartbreaking. I mean, you had kids that were like, they were like writing down like fireman or superhero, and they were like spelling it wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
What grade level did you say?
That was 8th grade.
Wow.
So these kids were writing like 2nd graders. Not all of them, but definitely a large chunk. You had some that were like, I want to be a famous rapper, or like, but it was really, really powerful moment for me.
Yeah, that really puts it in perspective how pervasive it is too, when you have, it's not just one kid there, that you said was a significant amount that were like that. Melissa, so obviously you're in a different situation. Have you seen, or I guess what was your first experience with a kid that, and too, your experience is different with special education as well. Do you have a specific instance you remember that was kind of like your welcome to education moment with a kid who was having a really tough time at home?
Yeah, so my situation is a little bit different. Being an early childhood special ed teacher, you kind of are that first contact when they come into the school. And unfortunately, in that position, you see a lot of neglect, you see developmental delays, and not all of that is something that's developmental. A lot of that is because of their environment. So I saw many, many students who probably would not have been in the special education setting had they had a different home life. So I would get students in who couldn't speak at all, couldn't hardly sit up, weren't potty trained, none of that, because the parents just didn't care. So when they came to me, we were starting at like a 1-year-old level cognitively. And as they grow, they obviously outgrow some of that with that love and support that they have, and the school would step in and help the families too. But my first experience was heartbreaking. I did home visits for my program, and so I went into the home, and the family lived in a trailer, and they had no furniture, and it was just filthy. CPS had been called many times. All they had were dirty mattresses laying in the middle of the house, and this little boy was 4, and he was the oldest of 5 kids.
Ugh.
So she just kind of had babies one after another. She had just had a newborn. And he was completely not there, like cognitively, because of the lack of emotional support. Nobody interacted with them. They didn't have television. They didn't have toys. There was nothing. And so one night I got a phone call saying that the parents had accidentally rolled over on the baby in the middle of the night and suffocated the baby. So all the kids got removed, and that was the last time I got to see him. But in that situation, like those boys in that house probably would not have had any, it was nothing that of any fault of their own. That's what I'm saying. Like they weren't born with a disability. It was their environment that was affecting it. So I think that we can even look back at infancy with these kids, and a lot of these kids just don't have a fair start in life. It's a bummer.
Wow, I don't think I've ever heard of that said specifically like that, where special education kids would be put into that, and it's not even like a mental disability or anything. No. It's because of, wow. In a way I didn't see that coming. That's
unfortunately, too, trauma is becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, trauma's always been there, but I feel like I am seeing it as a teacher of 17 years, I'm seeing it so much more. And I have more to talk about later with that. But I had specifically asked a psychologist that I work with, why aren't we adding trauma to the IEP? Because trauma presents itself as a disability with the behaviors, not speaking, unable to focus. And he said basically he was very, very intelligent man, and he had been in the psychology world for years. And so he went to a meeting in a different state with a bunch of other psychologists, and they were talking about adding that, and they came to the conclusion that parents wouldn't like it. Man. So they couldn't put it in the IEPs.
Can you explain that term, IEP?
Individual education plan. So any child with special education services needs that paperwork stating like exactly what they need. So the goals that they need, if they need occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, any kinds of like flexible seating that they need, modifications, accommodations, that paperwork states everything that child individually needs.
So the parents would not have been okay with the trauma aspect being put into that.
So you can put that the child is eligible for services under speech and language impairment or under a cognitive impairment because they were born with maybe cerebral palsy or a physical impairment or OHIs, otherwise health impairment. So maybe ADHD fits underneath that category or a learning disability. But then you get these kids who don't have any of that. It's just purely trauma. And the teachers are struggling to help these kids because they're not getting their basic needs met. So how can you teach them reading, writing, and math when they just didn't eat dinner the night before and the parents were fighting all night? And they won't add that to an IEP, so it's hard to get services for those kids.
So that's like compounding on the issue then. So it's like a double whammy of you're already going through all this and then you're being restricted. So in that regard, that's pretty much all on the parents then, isn't it? Like you can't really, you have your hands tied as a teacher and even school administration at that point, right?
Well, and you do as much as you can during the school day for that child. Like I've had kids who I've just let go take naps because they didn't get any sleep the night before. And I mean, if you're in fight or flight and you're not getting your basic needs met, how in the world am I supposed to teach you how to read? I can't.
I mean, there's been a lot of, I don't know if this research has been really recent, but I mean, it's kind of like the brain, especially if a child works in stages where like you have the stage that it wants safety, and then it wants love, and then it can finally be ready for learning. So if you're not safe, then you're not going to get to learning. If you don't feel loved, if you don't have that relationship, you're going to have learning. You'll probably have some learning, but it's going to be much less effective than if you have all of those. So if you have a kid that's constantly in a stage of like fight or flight, never feeling safe, there's almost nothing you can do in the way of learning for that kid. I mean, then you can make an environment where that kid, probably feels safe in class, but that's a tough road. And I mean, you change classes every year. It's tough.
Wow, I don't think I've heard that concept before. You said safety,
love, and then learning. So if it's really hard, if you don't feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to feel loved. If you don't feel loved and safe, it's going to be hard to learn.
So in your instance there, then Melissa, the safety and learning almost, the need is recognized, but then the parents won't allow you to get past those 2 points, right?
Well, it kind of resets every day. I had a student last year. He was being sexually abused by his mom and her boyfriend. And because he was on the autism spectrum and had some cognitive delays, he wasn't able to come out and say it. But we all knew as teachers that something was going on because he had younger siblings who were also like in diapers being changed by our ECSE teachers. And so we kept calling CPS. I mean, I don't know if I've ever called CPS more in my entire career as I did that year. And nobody would listen because those kids weren't able to come and say, I'm being abused. Like, I raised my sister-in-law from age 14 to 18 because she went to a counselor after her mom died and said her dad was neglecting her, and immediately they removed her from the home because she told them that he was an alcoholic and he was drinking and she needed a place to go, like immediately. And these kids, we all knew, you could see the signs based on the behavior, based on him clinging to my leg, saying he's scared to go home, asking and begging and crying at the end of the day before I'd put him on the bus, take me home with you, Mrs. Byrd, take me home with you. I mean, it was heart-wrenching. And our system is just so broken. Like, well, we have no proof. So I kept calling CPS and I would go up higher, up higher, up higher. I'm like, who else can I talk to? Who else can I talk to? Finally, I got through to somebody and ended up being subpoenaed to court and having to stand up against the mom and her attorney. And the kids eventually had a happy ending. The kids were all removed from the home, and she lost all rights. But it was heartbreaking. And in that situation, unfortunately, like, not all teachers know how to deal with that. So in this situation in particular, like, he was so scared of adults. So, like, before I could teach him anything, we had a meeting the spring before he came into my class because he had a one-on-one parapro with him. And they said, our goal for him is to keep him in the class. We don't expect him to learn anything. We just want to keep him in the class. And I get all feisty, and I was like, yeah, no, I don't work like that.
Happens all the time.
Yep, and I was so upset. So I just prayed the whole summer that the Lord would just help me build a relationship with him. And I did, and it was hard. It was hard to get him to trust me. But once he trusted me, by the end of the school year, I had him reading, writing. He wasn't at grade level, but he was probably at just one grade level behind. He was at a kindergarten level. He wasn't running out of the class. He wasn't having meltdowns anymore, except for when it was time to go home. But that's what I'm saying. Like, people need to build relationships, and it's kind of your steps to success there. I agree, because if you don't have a relationship with them, they are not going to want to learn from you, especially if they're coming from that trauma world.
How much of an active role, it sounds like you have quite an active role sometimes in specific situations, but what's your active role in helping a student's life outside the classroom? So, like, obviously you mentioned there calling CPS, going to court. Is there, like, you're building a relationship in the class quite a bit, but outside of the class, do you?
So we're mandated reporters, so if you suspect anything, you have to. And if they find out that you suspected something and you didn't, you can lose your job. Mm-hmm. So I've called CPS many a times because there's always at least one kid that you can't sleep at night about. You worry about them. But it was hard for me in that situation because I have 5 kids of my own. Those parents were very unstable. They lived right in the community. They knew where I worked. They had threatened me. And in between the court hearings, I actually had our school officer walk me and my kids out to the car, and they offered that because these people were not okay. They were on drugs, and so it was really scary. But I knew in my heart, if I didn't try to help this kid, I would never be able to live with myself. I had to do something. When you have a kid hanging on your leg, crying, begging you to not send them home, I'm scared. I don't know what to make my brothers and sisters for dinner. And he's 6.
Oh my
It's hard not to get involved.
Yeah.
That was a really, but also I made sure before I took those steps that I was supported by my administration. And I had complete support by my union, by my administrators, the superintendent, the principals. Everybody knew what was going on and were very supportive in making sure that I had what I needed. And then also we have a campus cop who was in my room every day, before I went to court. Because I wasn't expecting to get subpoenaed. I was freaking out. And he definitely came and prepped me, let me know what to expect. So I had a lot of support. If I didn't, I don't know how much further I would have gone just for my own safety and the safety of my family. So.
Wow. That is such an investment.
Yeah.
From you. That's remarkable. That's what it takes to be a good teacher, to be just looking at it from an education point of view, but in the end of the day, education almost becomes secondary at that point.
Right.
When you have genuine safety and human lives at stake. That's remarkable. And I bet you have instances like that, but in an entirely different way, considering the area that you've taught in, Riley.
I definitely feel the sentiment that they want to keep kids in the classroom no matter what, in a quote-unquote normal classroom. And that's kind of a self-defeating prophecy too, because if you have a teacher that, especially as the kids get older, if you have a teacher that is good at building relationships and then can do a really good job mitigating behavioral issues. So that's something that if there's one thing that I'm good at in managing classroom as a young teacher, it probably is behavior. So I would get kids that were behavior issues in other classes, and they wouldn't be so much in mine. But then when they see that you're doing a good job with behavior, then they think everything's fine. I had a 6th grader, and I took over this class. We won't get into that, but another teacher left. I took over this class. It was about 2 months into the year, maybe a month and a half. And he couldn't read. He was a 6th grader, could not read. And his IEPs were that, someone would be there, like a paraprofessional, to read these things to him, and he almost never had anyone there reading to him. His IEPs weren't being closely adhered to. And since he wasn't in behavior anymore, because I did have a good relationship with him after a month, he did a pretty good job of, following rules, following directions, and other kids would even help. And they shouldn't have had to, but other kids would help without my direction of reading to him to try to include him in things, which is a really wonderful thing to see. But then I'm thinking to myself, I have 90 students that I have to teach throughout, the day, 3 cycling classes. I'm so glad that I have a relationship with a student, but it's almost like it makes it easier for other people to turn a blind eye to the education that he's not getting. He wasn't, I'm sure he was learning in my classroom, but this kid needed to learn how to read and write, and I simply didn't have the time or really capability to teach him how to do that. So that is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy for the faculty who wanted to keep kids in the classroom. The kids who really need a lot of help don't have, the most involved or well-informed or even active parents. So it's really tough to give them what they need, and you can't. If the parents aren't on board with literally anything, or even giving parents coaching, or them asking you questions, or getting them involved in workshops about parenting or child caring, that comes with the first step of them admitting that there's a need, and that is a really hard thing for a parent to do. I am not currently enough for my child. There are very few parents who are going to admit that and accept help to correct that. The stories that you told about the kids who were living in those situations, I mean, you could almost guarantee that the parents wouldn't be able to admit that there's anything wrong with that.
Wow. It's just become normalized at that point.
Yeah, I mean, even in their head, I mean, and then you think about it, I mean, what gets someone to live that way? It's usually trauma. So you could think, like, you could just guess at the kind of lives that they had living, growing up. I mean, you can guess all day.
Generational.
But yeah, exactly. You could guess all day, but you can just assume that it wasn't that great.
Well, and it's tricky for me, too, because the school, even in the last 10 years, has changed so much. I mean, not only do we offer lunch, but it's free lunch. And now we offer free breakfast. Mm-hmm. And our school has a Pack It Up program that offers a sack lunch for dinner. So right now, schools for some families are providing breakfast, lunch, and dinner at all times. And some of the families that are accepting this, I'm like, do you really need that, though? Like, how are we supporting too much? Like, because at some point, are we enabling parents to not take responsibility for their own children because the schools will handle it, you know?
Yes.
So that's hard for me, too, because it's a fine line, because these parents need to learn how to step it up a little bit.
That's my next question. Is there a line you shouldn't cross in reaching out? I mean, that's a very good point you bring up, Melissa, that you don't, in a way, want to enable, but how hard is it to tell where you should step
Very
in,
hard.
where you should...
Very hard.
Because you're a teacher, you're not a parent.
Right.
But there's
But you love
sometimes you need to
kids,
step up
that's why we're
to
all
a
doing
point.
it.
Mm-hmm.
We love children, and so you want to help as much as you can. But yeah, there is a line for sure. I think I can draw that line a little bit better now that I've been doing it for so long, because I have my own kids. Like, I have to be able to still go home and have energy for them. Whereas before I was married and had children, it was like I could give a lot more to that. And now it's just like you have to draw the lines. But there are certain circumstances, like the boy that I was talking to you about, that in my just conscience alone, like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing if I had to do everything I could to get him out of that situation, because I knew he was being hurt. Mm-hmm. And now they're in foster care and they don't go to our school anymore, but they're doing so much better. Some of the social workers have told me, like, they're doing so great. So that's a happy ending to the story. So it's hard to know, though, where to draw the line.
Mm-hmm. It's also very scary because you hear a lot of stories about teachers who take advantage of their students in one way or another, and it's sometimes like the opportunities that you think to yourself, like, how did they even get that chance? And then sometimes you're like, oh, that's how. And it can kind of paint a really scary picture. Yeah. Again, middle school last year, 6th graders, I had this one, these two sisters, wonderful students, they're twins, loved them to death, had a really good relationship with them. Like 6 months in, I was talking to one of them. I was like, oh, like, what are you gonna do for? And she had a really bad home life. A lot of things were going on, and I know that they felt really safe with me. And you know, students, wonderful, good friends, love them to death. But I was like, oh, so what are you gonna do this weekend, you know, for fun? And she was like, oh, I really feel like I want to have like a sleepover with someone. And then she was like, I wish I could sleep over at your house. And then, you know, when a 6th grade girl tells you that, you know, your skin immediately starts to crawl, and then you're like, oh, like, what they're saying is very sweet and innocent, and they don't know any better. And of course, I was like, oh, you know, I'm a 28-year-old married man. That's not really appropriate. But then you think to yourself, like, ooh, what if I had been someone else? Then that's suddenly, like, your mind starts running, like, oh, now I can kind of see how people get in those situations.
Right.
And it gives you kind of that sick feeling in your stomach. Because even though this kid is in a bad situation at home and they feel really safe with you,
People take advantage.
People can take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And then you end up with a kid that is even worse off, even more messed up.
So that further adds to your burden as a teacher then, of makes you second guess yourself sometimes. I would assume there's some hesitancy there of...
I would say maybe not second guess myself, but especially as a male teacher, like, all like eyes are on you. I mean, it can be kind of tough. I guess maybe not second guess, but you can kind of start like looking over your shoulder, because then, like, obviously, I mean, as a teacher, I'm in that situation. I told her that wasn't appropriate, and it wasn't like a big deal. I just said, like, hey, this is why, that's we can't really do that. Had someone walked by and only heard the snippet of the conversation where the student was like, I want to spend the night at your house, that could have easily, like, without hearing any more of the conversation.
Right.
I mean, who knows? And then that goes to show a lot about, I mean, how bad is a student's life where they feel that safe around, like one of the safest people they feel around is a teacher they've only known for 6 months.
So, okay, that's interesting to hear the different aspects of your guys' active roles in helping students outside the classroom. Because, sounds like you can only go so far, and it's really kind of a touchy situation of, okay, where do I... And like you were saying too, Melissa, that you only have so much of yourself to give. So in that, do you wish there was more support from your school to be involved in students' home lives? What could that look like? I guess, Melissa, you've given one instance where a school has taken a more active role with meals, with food, which is a huge contributor to academic performance. And if a kid's hungry, he is not going to want to learn, not going to be able to learn. So have you seen support from your school in a way you like? Maybe there's other areas where you would want more support in that?
I feel like our school does a pretty good job of supporting teachers. I think that the financial aspect of schools, especially the public school, I don't know, I guess I've never worked for charter Christian schools before, but at least for the public schools, it seems like a lot of things, decisions are made based on money. So especially in the lower elementary, I think that we could do a lot better job if we had a little bit more support. I work in a preschool K-1 building, and we all said that we would love to see like one parapro, like one other adult in every one of those classes, because not all kids are coming to you with the horrible home life that we've been speaking of. Some of them are just your hyper little boys, or kids who maybe aren't having severe trauma at home, but just maybe not that stable environment, maybe just living with mom or living with grandma. They're still being loved, but also it's just not the typical norm that they were used to because parents just got divorced. So in that aspect, I would love to see more support within the classroom, just especially at that lower level, so these kids can maybe have that early intervention and be more successful as they get older.
So Riley, it sounds like something like that would have significantly helped some of your students, where at middle school they're so far behind. If they would have had a little bit more support early on, even taking the home life situation out of it, if the school could have supported them in a different way, more personalized early on, do you think that would have helped them overcome the challenges at home?
It definitely would have. At the very least, it would have given the kids a leg up, and being able, like, that personalized attention could have given them the boost they needed to be able to at least like read and write and the stuff that's really foundational for more learning. In terms of like support to help these kids get where they need to be, when I think of a school like in another country, like maybe in a rural area, or like in America, if you had like a town school in like a smaller, more rural community, I'm thinking of like you have faculty and teachers and parents involved, for better or for worse. If there's a problem that's keeping these kids from learning, let's put our heads together and what do we do to solve that problem? That doesn't really happen, and part of that is understandable because when you go to a place like an inner city school, the things like poverty and trauma, it's like this really awful web that encompasses so much of so many lives and so many different parts of the way that we live. So I'm thinking of like, okay, it's awful that this kid is homeless, that he has to dress his sisters for school in the morning. You immediately want to help solve that problem. Like what do we do? Like, let's teachers, faculty, parents, whoever, like, let's get together and solve this problem. That doesn't happen, no one's really doing anything for this kid. And then it's also like you're kind of like kicking the can to everyone else. Hey, we have like a family outreach guy. Well, he can get you over to these guys. Well, they can get you over to these guys. Well, they can get you over to these guys. I mean, you got 3 months and this kid's still sleeping in his car, and then pretty soon it's the end of the school year.
See, I wonder if that's different in inner city schools because it's more prevalent. We had a homeless kiddo, and I feel like our whole community wrapped around that family, and we have like a community coordinator, and she found them housing and helped them with the dental program because the kids were having teeth pain, and like they were wrapped up and encompassed, and so they actually the kids were able to be more successful in the school. So I just wonder if because it's more, maybe the money isn't as much in inner city schools, so they don't have that type of money or funding to put towards hiring a person like that, because that's her whole sole job, is helping people like that and getting them out of that niche that they're in.
I think it's also like a volume issue. So what you described is like a wonderful thing that I wish that I could do for all of my students. But I mean, I knew of one kid who was homeless and who was having these problems. So the reality was, I mean, a huge chunk of the kids that went to that school and a bunch of other schools around it, a lot of kids are probably living that life. What do you do for that many kids? If you have one family in a smaller community that needs help with housing or dental stuff like that, or raising money, that is so much easier than we have 30,000 kids. I mean, that's just, I'm throwing out a crazy number, but 10,000, 5,000, even 100 kids. Like, what do you do for 100 kids that don't have anywhere to live?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is that the school's job to fix that, or is that outside of the school? You know, I feel like that's out of teachers' hands. Like,
exactly. I mean, it is, yeah.
You just can't. I mean, I brought in kids' clothes for my own house to help support kids, and it's like, if they needed a home, what could I actually do?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I had, a wonderful experience. I befriended some of the parents and like really the whole family of two of my students. And me and my wife have been able to be mentors to them. And it's a Christian family. They really like the idea of like, me and my wife will hang out with these kids, again, as mentors, take them to the movies, or if they need, to go shopping, we'd be more than willing to do that. And that's a great opportunity, and that's like a community, however small it is, coming together to take care of students. Could I do that for all of my students?
No.
There's no way. It's
yeah.
wonderful that I could do it for these two, but I'm only one person. Like, the individuals can't solve those kinds of problems.
Yeah.
This is fascinating to hear, because this is anecdotal evidence, personal evidence from both of you of all the research I've been seeing.
Do you still want to be a teacher?
I know. I want to be involved in education somehow, especially with what we got going on at church here. But just the way top down that federally you have different administrations coming in with different educational policies for the whole nation that kind of focus on the end goal of, okay, why aren't these kids testing good? Let's change how the tests are. Let's change graduation requirements or whatever. And it's like, no, you're decorating the finish line before you're even
In my opinion, it has
and
nothing to do with the test itself.
No.
Right.
It's their basic needs.
Right, and so, I mean, that's evidence right there. You've given a couple stories here, Melissa, of, okay, CPS needed to be called in. Mm-hmm. The fundamental foundation of this kid's life has changed, and now they're thriving in a different area. That must be bittersweet for you too, to see more sweet than bitter, seeing them thrive. But and then like you said, with the homeless family, where okay, community has the resources, the ability to come around and support this kid, these kids, this family, and now they're able to focus on education because they don't have to worry about where they're living.
Right.
And so then the flip side of that is Riley's situation, where there's no resources in the community to come around struggling families, that everyone is in a position where they can only worry about themselves. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you have to worry about your own family first. And so, this kind of supports my whole idea of, okay, top down from like a government level, like federally, state, regional, to improve education, maybe we have to look at improving community around education, improving family lives.
Well, like my town is a small town and there's one school. Mm-hmm. Whereas like you look at Grand Rapids, it's a very big city with many schools. So I think that is a huge thing too, because I'm thinking even like the businesses around the school want to support the school in any way that they can, because the only school in the town, like dentist office, doctor's office. People support all the time. Here's a $10,000 check for this that we want to donate to the school from the dentist office.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Honestly, in inner city or even non-rural areas, there's almost like a real fear of engaging with your community. There's fear about meeting kids' parents. There's fear about saying the wrong things to kids. There's fear about I've known faculty or other teachers or even other faculty like deans or principals that they did not want anything to do with parents. They did not want to meet with them. They did not want to, talk about the needs of their children. That was left up to parents or to teachers, and then teachers could write them a report, and then they'd see what they would do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that I had to experience, and it made me yearn for an alternative to the education that I was a part of.
It's definitely education as a whole then has to be a collaborative effort.
Has to.
At every level, from home to at school to school administration.
And it's not. I mean, what she's describing sounds awesome, and that's how you think that's how all schools would operate, but more often than not, I've been at jobs where I doing my best, like every teacher should be doing, and I'm part of this giant team with technically surrounded by people in all sorts of classrooms and offices, and you feel like you are on an island.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a very isolating type of feeling.
Super isolating.
Yeah, that must
not
be,
always, but
right,
often.
Right. And that must be kind of frustrating to think about then, that you're putting in your all, but it can only
go so far.
Much. Wow. Well, this has all been extremely fascinating. It's been validating hearing your personal experiences and hearing how that ties into what I've learned so far. To wrap up here, obviously we've seen that everyone in society and community can have a role to play in supporting education. I think we've seen that they should have a role to play, however little that may be. What is one thing that you would maybe want to say to those that are directly involved in education? So other teachers, other faculty, administration, in regard to what we've been talking about, maybe like a word of encouragement, something you'd like to see changed regarding all of this?
It is not just a job. I have heard from teachers, I don't care how long they've been doing it, they are like, I'm here for 8 hours, I do what I can, and then I go home. I want those people to get a different job. I get it, you have to protect your peace, you have to take care of your family, but these students need to be loved, and they need to be loved by you, and you need to have some sort of personal involvement with that. You need to take care of your students. That needs to love them is your number one, that's your number one job. They can't learn without that.
So seeing it more as a calling, a life investment than just a paycheck.
Yes, this isn't, if you are just here for a paycheck, go do something else. If you could be the best teacher in the world, if you're not teaching with love, let someone else do it.
Interesting. Melissa, do you have a similar sentiment there?
Yeah, it's made me sad over the years. Like when I first started getting into teaching, there was an abundance of teachers. Like we had to fight for jobs. It was everybody was going into education. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started getting into special education, because then I could have that kind of dual endorsement and like be more marketable and stand out because I'm special ed and gen ed. I did everything I could to try to get a job. I applied many places and didn't get in because there's hundreds of applicants. And to see now today where we are in a teacher shortage and the teachers that we are getting in, I mean, we just did interviews for a first grade position because the lady retired, and we had two people apply, and honestly, we had to choose somebody, but neither one were like, wow, that's an amazing teacher. And then to watch the teachers, so many teachers nowadays, the most unlovable kids are usually the ones that need the most love. And like he was saying, like they get angry with the kids. It's frustrating. They're stressed out. Teachers are stressed. The students are stressed. We're arguing with little kids. Ugh. And it's so hard to watch because my number one goal as an educator is before I even start teaching anything, I spend the first 2 weeks building a relationship. Because if you don't have a relationship with those kids and they don't trust you and they don't see that what they do matters to you, the good and the bad, then you're not going to be able to teach them anything else. I have a group of boys in my room right now that are going to be like the future football team of our school. They are very, very wild and outspoken, intelligent, hyper. I mean, just your typical little boys. And they came in, they're like, yeah, we're naughty. We're going to be sent to the office. And I was like, I don't send kids to the office. We deal with it right here. And they're like, oh, no, you're going to want to send me to the office. But once they got a relationship with me, they didn't want to disappoint me anymore. Instead of like, and other teachers that they came from, they're like, how is he doing? He was horrible. And I'm like, fine. Because I now say to them, oh my goodness, like that hurt my feelings so bad that you just interrupted during one of my lessons, or I make it a personal thing, and they're like, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Byrd, because they're kids. They don't want to disappoint you if they care about you. And so I wish that I could see people with more of a passion. and think that we've lost what's important because teaching has gotten such a negative connotation, like, oh, don't go into teaching, you don't get paid anything, and the kids are horrible. And it has changed, especially since technology's been a huge thing for little kids, especially. I'm seeing it. These kids are put on technology instead of interacted with, and so it is changing. So that means we have to change the way that we're teaching. If you can't reach them how we used to, then we need to start changing things and informing parents. I was just telling Riley before we started this that I got on my soapbox during fall conferences because these boys were, all they're talking about was Minecraft and video games. And so I encouraged parents. I was like, here's the research. Like, can we try not to put them on technology before school at all, and then an hour before bedtime, take them off of it. And I had 3 parents by December who were like, wow, this has been life-changing. Thank you so much. They just don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, it's our job to, we might not be able to change everybody, but at least we can inform them, and the people who want to listen and try will, and maybe you can make a difference in just a few lives.
Man, that's a fantastic example of you taking an active role outside the classroom in something that will have a direct impact inside the classroom. And yeah, that all comes down to actually truly caring about the kid, not just the test results, not just doing your job, getting a paycheck, having a love, having a relationship there, and realizing it's a calling, having that perspective. So,
well, and treating these kids like they are actual human beings. Sometimes it's like, well, I am the authority and you are under me. Like, my kids, before we take those standardized tests, they're only in first grade, but they have a data binder and they have ownership. They look at their test scores, and I'm like, all right, here's the line. You know, we make it really simple, but here's the line, and we want that line to go up. Do you think you could do this? And they're all excited, and then as soon as they're done with their test, we look at the results, and it went up, Mrs. Byrd. You know, they're all excited about it because we give them ownership in it. Like, they need to know what's going on. It's not just like, well, this is a test, and this is serious. That's anxiety-ridden for little kids. They need to know what's going on.
So much anxiety and anger in the schools, dude. If you want to have like an awful time, go to a teacher's lounge. A teacher's lounge is one of the worst places in the world.
So negative.
I remember when teaching that first year of 6th grade, I had some angel baby students, man. I mean, every class is tough. Like, every class has its tough moments. But what I was coming from, I was like, these are some good kids, man. I love teaching them. You know, they're usually pretty excited. They don't give me much guff. Barely ever have to call for support. And then, dude, if you try to share those positive experiences, other teachers get mad. They get mad that you are not miserable. It's awful.
It's so true.
All they want to do is talk bad about the kids. I mean, we've all been there. Every teacher has, this kid gave me a run in today, like he gave me a run for my money. But every day, dude, no one wants to hear that. Or
I actually stopped going to the lounge because I'm like, I am done. Like, I am not a negative person, so I don't really want to be around negative people all day long.
And as you were saying, the standards for teachers are going down when they need to be going up. I mean, so like my first year being a 6th grade teacher, I had like 8 months experience as a substitute teacher, an in-house substitute teacher. When I went into that classroom and did what I did as the new teacher, and all I ever got were compliments and accolades from people who popped in and just saw that a lesson was going on. And that's not because I'm such a great teacher. That is because the bar is so absolutely low, and having walked in on some other teachers and the way they taught, I mean, it was like a madhouse. So even though I'm getting like a bunch of compliments, I'm thinking like, I don't know how to put together a lesson really. I mean, I can read this and then try to communicate to that, but there's so many skills that I don't have, and the few skills that I do have are seen as such an amazing thing. And again, that's not a testament to Mr. Flake as such a great teacher. That is, the bar is so low that someone with a little bit of empathy in 8 months training on really not even how to be a self-sufficient teacher could come in and get all those compliments. Kind of made me like have kind of a sick feeling in my stomach.
Oh.
I always say, like, people lower the bar even for students too.
Yes.
Like certain teachers, it's like, oh, well, you came from trauma, or oh, you have a special need that you need extra help with, you don't understand. So like for some students, like if they're not in this little box of this is how students should learn,
Just
and we want
give
them to
up
follow,
on 'em.
yeah, they're just like, whatever, we're gonna lower the bar, whereas I don't. And so I think that's why I get a lot of those kids in my class, because I always say I set the bar the same for every single kid. And some of them can get right to that bar, and some of them we just take a little bit different path to get there. But I'm not going to lower the bar for those kids. That's not fair to them, just because they were born with a special need or have a rough home life. Like that's why with that one kid, when they're like, we just want him to stay in the classroom, I'm like, absolutely not. Like, how
Yeah.
fair is that to him? It's not his fault he was born in this environment. Like, he deserves the same education as every other kid. And so, and he did it, and he proved it. And let me tell you, I didn't let that go. I made sure to tell everybody, look at this.
Yeah, literally.
You said and look at.
That's really cool to hear. So I've seen from a couple different places that lowering the bar doesn't raise up those at the bottom.
Oh, wow.
It just limits
No.
opportunities for everybody. It's not a good motivator, and keeping the bar where it's at allows kids to see excellence and attain to excellence, and then that's a fantastic feeling for a kid when, if he took that kind of wiggly approach and then he finally got there, seeing his potential and seeing the love and trust you've shown in them to get them to that point can do wonders for a kid.
Or even just getting, you're right, keep the bar where it's at, but even if you don't hit it, man, just getting halfway there.
Yeah.
I remember there was this one kid, I think at the time he was a sixth grader, my first year of teaching. He read the second grade level, and they really, really wanted him to get, he was a smart kid, you could tell these sort of things. He was a really smart kid. They wanted him to get reading at grade level. At the end of the year, he was up to fifth, and man, we were stoked though. I mean, no, he wasn't reading at a sixth grade level, but he moved up a couple grades. That was
Right.
huge,
Yeah.
and that was keeping it, like she said, consistent. Hey, these are the expectations. This is what we're going to do. This is what everyone does. It's so important.
That's
I'm
awesome.
curious, because I've had some teacher friends say that they feel inadequate to teach kids with special needs or trauma because they didn't learn that in college. Do you feel like that was the case for you?
Dude, nothing I learned in college trained me or prepared me the same way that experience does.
Yeah.
You can, if you have a heart to learn what you need to learn and a calling to teach, you can learn how to do that. So, I mean, growing up, I really didn't want to, I've been involved in the life of a child who has autism. So I learned a lot, none of it in college. I learned a lot through experience and through growing up with this kid, of learning how to deal with children who have those same afflictions or who have those same conditions. So for me, it honestly comes pretty natural to learning how to deal with kids with autism or behavior outbursts or anything like that. And none of that was taught in college. You don't need to take a college course on how to love and teach a child. You don't.
See, and like for me, going into special education, I felt very equipped. I did not have the same experiences working with special needs kids. I mean, I guess here and there, but there were so many classes on disabilities, psychology classes, and then instead of just having one student teaching experience, they required 4. So like I had to do an internship with birth to 3-year-olds and do like home visits, do that aspect of it. I worked at Lincoln Developmental Center, which is for like severely handicapped kids all the way from 3, I think, until 26. And then I had to do a gen ed position, which was a 3rd grade class, and then one more special ed class. So I had like 4 different experiences. And like you said, experience is where you like
Yes.
learn the most. And so my cousin, we had gone into teaching the same time. She worked at a different school. She called me. We both started teaching I was special ed, she was gen ed. We started the same year, and she would call me all the time crying. She's like, they didn't teach me any of this at school. And we both went to Grand Valley. She's like, they didn't teach me any of this. I don't know how to help this kid in my class, because all classrooms have kids with special needs in them, or disabilities, or trauma, behaviors, you name it, you know. She's like, I had one class that talked about special education, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I was just curious if you felt like that too.
And those things, and I mean, like, that's not to say that, like, I think that those things are useless. Like taking class, and I'm sure you feel the same way, like taking classes on those sort of things. I mean, seminars, workshops, getting degrees, and those, like those are great things. But like, you don't need those things to
be a good teacher.
Yeah, to be a good teacher, or to even get get started. You can get started loving a child, and then you will then get started teaching a child, and then you will see their needs as you become close to them.
Anybody can read curriculum and learn how to teach it.
Yes, very, very true. Mm-hmm. Like if you can read, you can teach some curriculum to someone. But that's not the hard part. That's what people don't realize.
Yes.
Yeah, this ties right back into what you guys were saying about it being a calling and having an actual heart for kids, where if you start out at that baseline, it sounds like everything else just kind of falls into place as you're patient with it.
Yeah.
I could not imagine doing this if I didn't have a calling for it, and so many people do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have seen some people who should not be in a classroom teaching classroom, and they've been teaching for 20 years.
And they're just miserable.
Yeah. Mm. Stay out of the teacher's lounge, guys.
Yeah. Last question I got here. So we talked about a message you might have for fellow teachers, for other faculty. What's one thing you'd want those who are indirectly involved with education to take away from all this, like parents, family, community? What's one thing that would maybe be helpful to take away from this conversation?
We've talked about how important it is to help these kids, but how also easily it is for people who have ulterior motives to take advantage of kids. You have to, whatever it looks like, you have to be wise. You have to cultivate wisdom. You have to recognize when something is good and when something is not. You have to be involved with your kids. You have to know what's going on. You got to know what's going on in their social media. You got to know what's going on with their games. You got to be involved in their learning. You got to be involved in their safety. You have to work with people too. You also have to know the people you're working with.
So I feel like sometimes parents might be overwhelmed on not knowing what to do or inexperienced, but you're saying that maybe just involvement, just being present would go a long ways.
I mean, it's the same thing we were talking about teaching. Like you don't get a certificate that says, hey, now you can be a parent. You know, you love your kids. You be involved with them. You see their needs, and then you watch to make sure that what they're doing is safe and the people that they're involved with are safe.
So, Melissa, from what you've said previously, it sounds like you have a student body with very active parents. Mm-hmm. And so would your message maybe just be to keep up with that?
Well, I mean, just because we have a more active doesn't mean that it's 100%. Like, I've seen firsthand, if I recommend, like, hey, we are making progress as a class, and then all of a sudden you have your stragglers back here who are struggling, and I'm like, hey, here are some sight words that you could really work on at home. I think this would really help. And the parents who actually do the sight words, I can see their kids catching back up. The parents who don't work with their kids or don't read with their kids, they stay stagnant, and then they're constantly behind, and then they're behind the next year and the next year. It's like working with your kids at home actually really does work. We can't do it all as teachers within the school setting. You cannot. Mm-hmm. We need their help.
Well, what would you say to maybe someone like me who I'm interested in education? I'm not going to become a teacher. I don't have kids of my own. What's one thing I could do to kind of help you guys out in education as a community member?
Get in the classroom, like whatever that looks like, even if you're just like, so if someone's working in education and they want to help education, they need to be involved in education at the ground level, which is in a classroom. You would not believe how many times there are people that are the decision makers for our educational system that they had maybe 3 years experience in a classroom 15, 20 years ago. Mm. So staying involved in that is super important, however you can.
Interesting. So like me as a community member, even just like volunteering time would be
Perfect.
a fantastic way to do that.
Come be a para for a day. I'm sure.
People are so ready to judge the school systems, and I'm not saying that they're perfect by any means. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things that are frustrating about it, but there's also really great educators out there and people who are passionate. And so sometimes it's so sad to me to hear such a negative rap against teachers, against schools. You know, why does anybody want to send and trust those people with our kids? And it's like, if you actually just came into the school for 2 seconds, you'll see that there is a lot of good. I know we've talked about a lot of the concerns because that's what you're doing your paper on, but honestly, I could talk for another hour on all of the great things that happen within the school setting too. There really are good things happening. There are good teachers out there. And if people would just take time to step into a school, you'll see that they're not actually as scary as everybody makes them sound.
I completely agree. There have been times that we have talked a lot about the negativity, and there certainly is a lot, but I have seen teachers that, I mean, from where I'm looking, you can never know, but from where I'm looking, this kid, they feel like the only person that cares about them right now is this teacher or this person at the school. People really do want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to education. Not perfect, but it is valuable. The education system we have now, there is a lot of value in it. And that value, I mean, it just starts small. Like, the individuals are what make things the big picture, you know, and we need good individuals who care about kids, care about education, and love them. And everything else, like you said, everything else will fall into place.
So from a community point of view, maybe just a change of perspective is needed to look at support from a more positive way. Of
That'd be a good start.
How do we help make this better instead of, oh my gosh, we see all these issues.
Yeah. Posting it on the informed pages.
Yeah. Oh my God, don't even get me started. But then your scope widens. I mean, if you're like, oh my gosh, like how do we help this kid that's homeless? Well, then the question becomes, what do we do about homelessness? How do we help this kid who lives in poverty? Well, the question becomes, what do we do about poverty? I mean, you start asking those questions and start really moving to solve them. I mean, you're changing the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That is all the questions I have for you guys. I really, really appreciate your perspective, your expertise, and more than anything, your heart for kids and your willingness to be patient, to invest, and I'm really, really grateful for you guys' time here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you all for taking the time to listen to the experiences of these two amazing people. I hope those working in education are encouraged in their calling. I hope they realize just how much they mean to all of us and that their investment is worth it. To those outside of school walls, parents, families, communities, excellent education depends on us too. We need to support the teachers and faculty that pour their lives into our children, and we need to match that effort at home too. Education is a community effort. It takes a village. Our kids truly deserve our best.